Hey everybody, welcome back to LFBT Pod. I'm your host Jenna.
And I'm your host Emily.
Today, we're in a new location. If you're watching, you can see that. This is going to be the new routine. So we are going to switch back and forth between sets, aka our houses. Today, though, we'll have a lot more distractions, as you can see. My boys are just a lot more active than Emily's girls,
But also, what did you just give them?
We may have coerced them with some catnip, but it'll make the show more interesting for you. So if you're watching, and if you're not watching and you're just listening on Spotify, head over to our YouTube at LFBT Pod, and you can watch these clowns just do their thing throughout the episode. Today, we're going to be going over part 2, which is the Postman. Emily, who is the Postman?
It's our boy Jude.
We learn a lot about Jude.
Yes, we do.
Let's get into that. I almost forgot. We have to do our cat pick of the week.
How could we forget that?
How could we forget it? Let's do yours first. Let's show it right here. Emily's cat pick of the week.
My 2 beautiful babies.
All right. Here is my cat pick of the week.
So cute. So we get into chapter 1.
Chapter 1 had a lot to discuss.
Oh my gosh, it went on for a very long time, but it was all so important to the story.
It was all very important.
So we decided
we're going to talk about our favorite parts of this chapter, since it is so long. Want to give us your favorite part first?
Oh my gosh, which part? I want to say JB's nickname for Jude.
We learned very fast why this part is called the Postman.
The Postman. So JB decided one night that he was going to nickname Jude the Postman due to...
It all relates back to postmodernism, but they felt like Jude related the most to this topic, and he really doesn't have a sense of who he is or
where he came from.
Exactly.
It's all very... It's sad to me because he doesn't have any sense of himself at all.
Yeah, definitely. It's very sad, but they make it is a cute nickname, and they make light of the situation. All of the boys are still hanging out. Willem and Jude still live together. Willem is a full-time actor at this point.
Go Willem.
Go Willem. Okay. Yeah. And really the whole first chapter is really this whole part is about Jude. And what's your next favorite part?
Oh, I don't have, let's just say favorite person. One of my favorite people from this part is Anna.
Oh, Anna.
Anna
was Jude's caretaker or social worker.
She was a social worker, but she took on the role of caretaker. Yeah. I mean, there was nobody there for Jude, we learned.
Very close. They were very, very close.
And this was right after the car accident that we don't know anything about.
The mysterious car accident. But this relationship starts to happen right before Jude goes off to college.
Yeah, so he's still at that age where he can be adopted by families. And he does actually get adopted by a family. And it was a family that had many adopted children of different disabilities. And they kind of stay in touch. And then Jude graduates. He's still in touch with Anna and Anna's wife. And then we kind of get into more sadness because Anna gets sick with cancer.
Poor Anna. And this really affected Jude, too. I mean, obviously they were very close. Yeah. And then right before Jude goes off to college, Anna passes away.
Yes.
And so he kind of loses that person that is his mentor, his person, really. But then not too long shortly after, he meets The next mentor.
Our favorite character.
Yes. And that is Harold. Oh, Harold.
Oh, Harold. Oh, Anna. Oh, Harold. So
love them both.
Harold is Jude's mentor through law school, because we're in the little area of postgraduate.
Yes, I think
to be undergraduate degree. Yeah, in law school.
Yeah,
and we learned that
Jude is so smart.
Oh my gosh, she's so smart.
Oh my gosh, and this comes up later in the chapter, but Jude is really in law school to protect himself.
Yeah, and we start to find out more about that, but him and Harold are they're getting really close.
Very close. Yeah. I mean, Harold is mentoring him, obviously, in his studies in law. Harold is teaching him to drive. This was over a really long span of time. I think you said like a decade, right?
Yeah, a decade. That's later referenced as a whole decade.
Bought him new clothes so that he would fit in at school. Bought suits so that he would fit in at law school.
He was a father figure.
Very.
That Jude needed.
And I feel like Harold wanted to know more about Jude and the way he grew up and his past. Jude wanted to tell him, but it just wasn't time for that yet.
No. Jude is very closed off with people. It takes him a very long time to get to that point where he can not only trust them, but be vulnerable with them, because it's very hard for Jude to be vulnerable. And we learn that throughout the story. With that vulnerability, he can get into these, what would you call them? Episodes?
I would say so, yeah.
And so he has one night after the boys and him get invited to Cape Cod.
From Harold and his family, which Harold and his wife,
Julia,
loved them.
Oh my gosh.
They met the boys, and really just treated Willem and Malcolm and JB the same way that they treated JB. I'm sorry, treated Jude.
Okay. Yeah.
It was so sweet. I love that they just kind of took them all in. And, by this time, Jude had stayed the night a couple times at their house.
Yep.
So they were all very, very close at this point.
So Jude has one of his episodes, his very first one, in front of Harold. And it just puts him into this spiral of going back to his childhood and all the trauma that came with it.
This was the hardest part to read, I think, about this chapter.
I think I actually cried.
I'm sure that you did.
I'm sure I did. I think I've cried twice during this part.
Yeah.
I really do think that. But
it essentially takes us really as a flashback.
Yeah,
back
completely.
To Jude's childhood. And we find out that he was raised in a monastery with brothers. And it was just... he was abused in many, many ways. And when he was younger, he had a problem with stealing. And
he was very rebellious.
And was obviously, punished for that, but punished in way not to that extent should ever be punished.
No, and he was really young when he started experiencing that. And so we just know that
so much to the fact where the brothers even told him that when they found him as a baby, he was found by the dumpster in trash.
Yep.
That I literally wrote in my book. This breaks my heart. Like a big broken heart.
That's literally where it's very rare where I get those literally gut punches. Or chills. But I literally felt like I got punched in the gut when that was mentioned. Oh my gosh. It
was definitely very, very hard to read, but it gives you every aspect of how hard his childhood was. And I'm sure we don't even know the half of it yet, but whew.
Yeah, I have a feeling there's a lot more to come after this of what we're discussing today. So what's next after that? We kind of get into the fear of men that Jude has.
Right.
Because of all of his abuse, because he was surrounded by men his entire childhood.
Yeah.
So with that abuse came the fear of men, which...
There was even that one instance where he was playing around with Harold, and Harold went to play scare him.
Yep.
And Jude kind of freaked out and knocked a vase off, which the vase was Harold's son's.
who we learned passed.
He did pass
at a young age.
And that's very hard, which also I think that's a lot of the reason that Harold relates to Jude.
He sees him as his son.
He sees him as his son.
Oh my gosh.
Definitely.
That's so hard.
And I think that just, I don't know, the relationship that those two had is so indescribable.
It healed me.
It healed you?
It healed me. I'm so serious right now. It healed me. I'm tearing up right now because it's so strong, and the way the author wrote that relationship between them is so special. Literally, I'm tearing up. Jude explains that like hardly anybody is trusted in the monastery, but he does have this closer relationship with Brother Luke, even though he is one of the men who abuses him. But it's described as Jude explaining like it's because they made him kind of deal. And that's kind of where we ended off. We just ended off pretty,
Yeah, it kind of still stuck in time at the monastery. We know that it's just a really, really tough way to grow up.
Yep.
Since chapter 1 was so long, chapter 2 was so short. I feel like.
It's like one of the shortest chapters I think we've come across.
Definitely, so far, for sure.
So in this chapter, we get Harold's letters to Jude.
Yes, Harold's letters to Jude. It really starts out with a big, long monologue. And I know you had a quote from the monologue that you wanted to share, so you go ahead and share yours first.
I'm gonna share my quote real quick. Okay, so it's so beautiful, I think, because it really shows how Harold looks at Jude's friends, and including that friend, Willem, our dear Willem. We know that Willem is like this caretaker for him, but one of my favorite quotes is, "And then you touched his shoulder and moved in front of him and knelt and retied one of his shoelaces that had come undone and then fell back in step with Julia." He didn't even ask him to tie his shoelaces.
Yeah, he just did it.
He just did it. That's Willem. That's Willem to Jude.
Yeah, so that really started with a big, long monologue about how Harold views Jude and sees him from his eyes. But then we kind of go into the backstory of Harold. We find out that he was married once before.
And he had a son.
Yes.
That
had sadly passed away. I'm not really sure if we know how he passed away.
I don't think we do.
Let me Google that.
Yeah.
So we do see here that he died of a rare neurodivergent disorder when he was only 5 years old.
Yeah, he was young.
That breaks my heart. So that's another reason why, like, I feel like Jude and Harold relate so much, because Harold has seen loss. Harold has seen grief. He has dealt with it. And I even think he said something along the lines of, to know love is to know fear equals to love a child.
Does.
I mean, and I don't know that feeling, but I can imagine.
Yeah, he goes over, we kind of talked about this before, but how Harold doesn't care about what happened to Jude's past.
No.
He is there for Jude now and who Jude is today. Oh my gosh, I'm going to start tearing up again.
Oh my.
It's so sad, but it's honestly so beautiful.
He was published in his acknowledgments of Harold's book.
That.
Oh my gosh. I read that and I was like, that is the sweetest thing ever. So yeah, I don't know what y'all are talking about, how sad this book is. I'm not sad yet. I love the sweetness so far.
There's a lot of sweetness. Oh my gosh.
I know it's going to get sad.
It's going to get rough, I think.
Definitely.
I think we might. Well, I've already cried, but I think you might finally cry quite a bit.
Try to break me. Andy, though, we learned a little bit about Andy. I think maybe it was either in the first chapter or this chapter. I can't remember. I think
it was last chapter. But Andy's always been there for Jude. We know that he's like his main doctor, his
his orthopedic surgeon.
His orthopedic surgeon originally, But
we really find out that Andy cares a lot about Jude, more than Jude even knows. We find out so much so that he like tells his wife and family about Jude.
He does.
He calls him Judy.
Judy.
Oh, I love that.
So
I'm gonna start referring to Jude as Judy from now on, just so everybody knows.
Little Judy. Oh my gosh.
We find out about Jude's scars too.
We find out a lot about the physical harm that not only the brothers put him through, but himself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we really get into, like, I would say the more triggered parts of this book so far. We won't, like, discuss any of that, of course, but it really ties it into, like, some of the relationships that he has and how strongly Andy feels for him. He wants him to have help. He wants him to go to a therapist.
And for him to take care of himself, take care of his body.
Yes, exactly. From his daily meals up until caring for himself and his scars that he currently has in his legs and his back.
Yeah. So really that's the main characters that we have come across so far. No one else new has been introduced other than, Harold's past wife, Harold's son that has passed away, and now his new wife, Julia. We love Julia.
Julia and Harold are perfect for each other. They are just like these parental figures that they don't care what happened to Jude. They're there for him, and they're so loving, and they're so welcoming to his friends. They include them in, like, vacations, just hanging out all the time. I really
think a lot of that is because Harold's been a parent before, but he just never got to do the adult years. He got to do the child years with his son, but he didn't get to do the rest of the years.
Holding political conversations.
Yeah.
That really goes over what Jude does for a living. He's a county clerk, but
we find out he does lots of other jobs, actually.
He
was a baker. That's actually why he met. That's how he met Harold in the first place. He made a cake and then secretly told Harold that he didn't make the cake, but Harold loved the cake, and it was for him and his wife. Oh, it was
the little cookies. So she is like this highly intelligent, scientific STEM lady, and she was throwing a party, or there was a small party at her college, and Jude, without knowing, made these cute little microbiome thingies.
I believe you. I don't know.
Whatever they're called. I'm not STEM.
But yeah, chapter 2
is and stuff.
Yeah.
There we go. Sorry.
Chapter 2 is really a lot about Harold.
Yes.
We learned mostly about him in this chapter, and I gotta tell you, love that man.
He's perfect for this story, I think. Let me open up my good old book here.
We start off chapter 3 with Judy getting a painting in the mail from JB.
So JB, remember, he's an artist.
Yes.
And he was painting from photographs of Jude.
Yes.
And his many emotions.
Yes. And so Jude has this painting that he gets in the mail, and he calls up Willem. He's like, Willem, I got this painting in the mail. And Willem's like, I know. And Jude's like, what? And then we find out that it was Willem's idea, and that it was the only way to end the fight or feud that was going on between Judy and JB.
Oh, the reason why they were getting into an argument was because Jude felt violated.
And Jude felt violated because it went back to a flashback of this art show that JB was having. All the boys go to this art show, and that is when Jude finds out that the photos, or paintings rather, that are in this art show are of him.
All of him.
They're all of him.
And friends, but there's a lot of Jude in there.
The point is, he didn't know.
No, he didn't know.
And the two main paintings on display were of Jude in a very emotional state.
Yes.
Or that's the way it's described. And so Jude felt very violated and hurt by this, and it caused this big, huge fight between the two of them.
And they stopped talking for a long time. So that's when we get into the painting again, of being gifted it to it. So like it's like an apology kind of painting. So
Willem got a film role.
Willem did get a film role. He's moving up in the film industry.
Yeah, he dumps his girlfriend, and he's now dating a new person called Philippa.
I don't know. Right? Something like that.
And then now the argument is kind of over between the two boys because of the painting. And we find out that the two boys kind of wrote each other, and that kind of helped resolve the tension that was happening.
Yes.
And the letters were really sweet.
They were really sweet.
Yeah.
No matter like how many fights you get into, you're always gonna go back to your best friends.
That's just the way that it is.
It is, and Jude's learning that. He is. He's so bad on himself, but at the end of the day, he's like, wow, I have some really good friends, you know? So Jude goes to Harold and Julia's Thanksgiving. Yes.
Oh, yes. And Harold apparently makes Thanksgiving always this big, huge deal.
Yep.
And he wants to make this big, elaborate menu and goes all out. Well, it always fails and ends up not being the big, fantastic meal that he planned it to be. So that happens when he goes. But all the friends were invited for Thanksgiving.
Yep.
And I thought that was super sweet.
Harold and Julia. Again.
Julia, man.
Being the best couple ever.
But then we also find out that Harold has something that he wants to talk to Jude about.
And immediately Jude is like, oh my gosh.
So
he doesn't want to talk to me anymore. What did he find out about my past?
I've been hanging around him too much.
Just a bunch of anxious thoughts.
Yes. And it was written exactly. I struggle with anxiety, and it was written.
Me too.
That way.
It was of like just so many different, thought processes going on at once.
Your brain going a mile a minute.
Yeah, mile a minute is exactly right. So, what did Harold want to talk to Jude about? Let's talk about that.
He and Julia have decided that they want to make an offer to Jude to adopt him.
I cried.
And
again.
Then, can I say something really fast?
Yeah.
Emily said something to me, and she was like, I predicted this probably a week ago.
Yeah.
A little bit of a week ago. And I was like, I think when we first got introduced to Harold, I was like, I think that he's going to be a father figure in some type of way. Girl. He is.
And now he is officially.
And of course, Jude says yes.
Of course.
And
there was no thought about it. Harold was like, we'll give you time to think it over. But Judy, he's like, I don't need time to think it over. You're my dad.
Yeah.
Like just this father figure. And
I loved that.
Oh my gosh. That's
so then
rough.
Judy wants to tell William the news.
Yes.
And because he's out of town and he wasn't at the Thanksgiving. So he calls him, and that's one of the first times, I think, that Willem actually says I love you to Jude on the phone. And it did say that Jude didn't know how to respond. He never knows how to respond when Willem
I don't
says
think
stuff
he's
like that.
ever heard I love you.
Yeah.
That
makes me so sad.
That makes me very sad. It just shows that Jude just did not get any love as a kid. He was not allowed to be a kid.
Everyone else was obviously very excited for him, and then he obviously wanted to tell Andy too, because he's very close with Andy. And he went to go tell Andy, and Andy kind of like freaked out and asked him to leave his office. And I was very confused by that. But then maybe a paragraph or two after that, it was a letter that Jude had gotten from Andy. And that letter was so sweet.
Just this whole part was just like,
yeah, I got the feel goods during this chapter.
Yeah, me too. It was so exciting to see Jude come so far and get that love that he really truly deserves, because he's, from what we've seen, he's such a good person and he's so thoughtful.
Yeah. So Andy sends the letter and the flowers. And then we also kind of learned that Jude was also almost adopted one other time in Montana when he was living in Montana. And I think that family's name was the Learys.
Sounds right, yeah. And Corey was... Who was Corey again?
I think that was the dad, the adopted dad or whatever.
Oh, okay.
But really, all in all, the full story to that was that they kind of just decided on a whim that they didn't want him anymore.
Nope, they didn't want him. And it was so random.
And sudden.
Yes, it was very... I don't really know how to describe that part. It was just like, it went by so fast. I really felt for Jude. He was so excited to be a part of a family for once, and he didn't get the opportunity to.
And so that feeling just kind of stays in the back of his mind, I think. And
it does.
That's a theme throughout the rest of this chapter. Him just being nervous that Harold and Julia are going to back out on this adoption process.
But it's so beautiful because it's a found family.
Absolutely.
Those are my favorite, by the way. Those are literally
your favorite trope.
Yes, one of my favorite tropes is found family. Like, because I have many found families that I have found over the years, and just being able to relate to somebody like on a deeper level, just a character. He's just a character, but I relate to him so much. It's insane.
I love that. So he's really anxious about the adoption. And we find out that Andy is also telling Jude, like, you have someone that's going to be your family now. You need to start taking care of yourself.
You need to tell Harold what is going on and what happened in your past.
Yep. And so, and I really do think Jude wants to tell the truth and wants to tell Harold, but it is just such a hard thing to talk about and to bring up.
It is.
To light again. And he's very skeptical to do that.
But we also, he gets triggered by that stuff. The pain in his back, the pain in his legs, it all comes up again when he is vulnerable. I'm going to use that word again because that is Jude to a T, is vulnerability and just being vulnerable with the people that he loves.
And then we get to Adoption Day.
Adoption Day.
And it's the 15th. I don't know what month it was, but I know that it was the 15th because that was made very clear.
In accounting, the inventory turnover is a measure of the number.
My Alexa just went off.
It's terrifying.
She's listening.
Such as a year.
We never even said her name. So we get into the gifts that Jude got from his friends, and JB got Julia and Harold a painting of Jude from his art gallery. And then, surprise.
Surprise! Willem showed up and showed out. He showed up and he gifted a statue, a wooden statue of St. Jude. And St. Jude is actually, we found out, the patron saint of lost causes, which kind of broke my heart a little bit to hear that. But it is very, very sentimental and very sweet. And Harold definitely admired it, and he even asked about the wreath of fire that was on the statue's head, or St. Jude's head. And Willem actually explained to him, this was my favorite part, that it was to show that Jude was an apostle. He was at Pentecost and he received the Christ. And Julia actually interjected, and she said, St. Jude is the patron saint of lost causes. She thanks Willem for the gift, and Jude himself actually brought a gift. He gave Harold and Julia a CD of himself singing.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe I forgot about that part.
Yes, and he was really self-conscious about it, but Harold put it on a bookcase and kept it there where it would be untouched and stayed safe, but a very, very sentimental gift. And I loved all of that. I loved that everyone had like a little gift, except Malcolm. Malcolm, where's your gift, bro?
Yeah, what? He doesn't have anything.
His love and affection. He showed up.
That's it. And then we kind of go back to present day again. I like after a little bit actually. Jude was tutoring Felix.
Yes, the piano player.
The piano player, German speaker.
Yeah.
he was like Felix. They're both like so similar. I don't know what I was trying to say. They're both very similar because Felix is younger. He's getting tutored, but he is so lonely. He doesn't have any friends.
I feel like Jude is kind of like going to be Felix's mentor, even if he doesn't think he knows it. But
he's going to be the herald.
And they kind of talked about friendship at the very end of the chapter. And
they did,
and even said because friends can't teach you about yourself. And this is the hardest but most rewarding lesson that a person can learn. I thought that was so cute. I actually underlined that one in my book because that was one of my quotes that I was like, that's a life quote.
It's so beautiful because Felix is so lost at his point of life. And even though Jude is lost as well, you know, Jude is able to look back and be so thankful for the friends that he's come across and for Harold and Julia.
And he would not know who he was if it wasn't for those people in his life.
All those people basically that are mentioned in the chapter.
Yeah, he's learning. He is learning so much about himself at the ripe age of 29, almost 30. And I feel like that's kind of what we learned about in this part is kind of like him growing up and he's kind of finally figuring out like who he is and he's building his new story. Like his past is not going to be his story
new
anymore.
Narrative.
Yes. Ooh, okay, good.
I like that.
Nice.
Oh my gosh, that's such a beautiful chapter. And I mean, those are our favorite parts. It was so heavily detailed.
Yes, it definitely was.
There was a lot that happened, but
I'm sure we're missing a few things.
Oh,
but
we probably are.
For the sake of time and for the sake of the episode, this was part 2, The Postman.
The Postman.
We loved it. I'm so excited. I've already read a little bit into the next Vanities.
Oh, I'm not there yet, but
I'm excited.
I have a feeling. I'm excited, but I'm also like terrified from what I've heard. Like people on Book Talk and BookTube talk like about this part of the book.
Trying so hard not to get spoilers for this book is so hard.
So hard.
The Postman was all the good feels for me.
See, I think the opposite. It felt like an emotional roller coaster for me. I felt so many emotions in that one part that I was set for the whole book.
Minus the parts where we learned about his childhood, I think. I think it was all good feelings. We're learning about Jude's new narrative.
New narrative, yeah.
And I'm excited to see what's next. I've already started reading a little bit into Vanities. That's going to be the next chapter, part 3. Part 3.
Yeah, part 3. We're going to start to get into, I think, the more heavier parts of the book. At least that's what I've heard.
Yeah.
I guess we'll find out.
We will. Stay tuned to some content on some of our social platforms, TikTok and Instagram at LFBT Pod. We're going to be posting some new stuff on there. And other than that, we will talk to you when we get done with Vanities.
Let you know how it is.
See you next time. Thank you.
Bye.